Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and Norway has gone full stupid again, and we have a Norwegian here that will not refute our claims, because the fact is Norwegians are painfully taxed, and the spending by the government is insane, and get this! We talk about voluntary taxes, voluntary individuals putting money into a community pool in order to fund things as voluntarists. But when we talk about that, we're not talking about voluntary taxes on top of already mandatory taxes at gunpoint. Taxation is theft, folks. Yep. And it's insane that anyone can base the idea of a voluntary tax on top of other taxes. It's stupid. Who's stupid enough to pay more money to the government willingly on top of all the money they are already being forced at gunpoint to spend? So as this article from Bloomberg Politics talks about, Norway's voluntary tax plan brings in just $1,325. Of course, that's completely laughable. And people are using this as an example of how, voluntary taxes don't work. Well, no, if you aren't being extorted, you might be more willing to put money into a community pool because you will have much more money than you necessarily need in that situation. But let's go into this article. So, as it says, eager to pay more taxes? Then look no further than Norway. Hammered by the opposition for slashing taxes and going on a spending spree with the country's oil money, the center-right government has hit back with a bold proposal: voluntary contributions. Launched in June, the initiative has received a lukewarm reception, with the equivalent of just $1,325 in extra revenue being collected so far, according to the finance ministry. That's not much for a country of 5.3 million people, many of whom are already accustomed to paying some of the highest taxes in the world. The top rate of income tax is about 46.7%. As it says here, the tax scheme was set up to allow those who want to pay more taxes to do so in a simple and straightforward way, Finance Minister Sigurdson said in an email comment. If anyone thinks the tax level is too low, they now have a chance to pay more. This is like a really stupid parody, like total satire, because first of all, who wants to pay more taxes? And if you do, the door's already open for that. You realize that in almost any country, you send a check to the treasury, you can actually give the government more money. But why would you want to do that? That's so dumb. This is just, like, I can't even... It's so stupid, John. Like, you come from Norway. Go into this. You have an article that's actually from Norway, that's in Norwegian. Can you go into this?
Well, oh my God. It's no surprise that this, of course, have happened now. You gotta remember, Sigurdson, of course, attended Bilderberg 2 years before she became the finance minister of Norway.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, the FRP in Norway, the Progressive Party, you can call them if you translate them, they are actually for lower taxes, and they're more like the PCs here in Canada. But they're still statist, quite substantially statist.
Well, of course. Well, government
even more so than in Canada. Now, what's interesting, of course, you said that people were calling it a stupid idea, and I never agree with the Workers' Party in Norway, but I have to agree because at their national convention they called, of course, the proposal, when it was a proposal of the idea of a voluntary tax, they called it completely stupid, and they called the guy, the financial political advisor, Harald Jacobson, they called him stupid.
Well, okay, I just want to add to that for a second. Now, let's keep in mind that this Labour Party, that this Workers' Party, whatever it's called, I don't know.
Let's keep Workers' Party. It sounds more right of what they are, like they're commies.
Yeah, well, they are commies, and the point is, what I wanted to throw into that was they're saying it's stupid, but not for the same reason that we are. They're saying it's stupid because they want to be able to force people to pay more taxes.
So listen to this. Okay, so of course they've been in power for a very long time until actually the progressive and the conservatives got in power in Norway just recently. Now, of course, they have a proposal for a new election that's coming up in Norway. They want to add 64.5 million kroner more taxes in 2015, and of course they want to tax you if you actually are saving money in the bank. So this is a tax that we have in Norway that's interesting. It's called formuesskatt, which is basically a tax on your asset that you've saved up in a bank account.
Yeah.
So they tax you every time. It's almost like negative interest rates. It's a tax that they tax you for actually have saved up money in a bank account and are holding it there.
Good old extortion. Is that kind of like a capital gains tax or a dividends tax?
No, it's not, because it's tax on money in your bank account that you saved up. Okay,
That's insane.
so it's yeah, but the capital gains and all that other stuff comes on top of everything. And now, of course, they didn't have property tax, which was fantastic in Norway, that they didn't have that, because that gives you actually the individual freedom to own your property. Well, of course, now tons of cities like Oslo and others have voluntarily implemented these taxes onto their population. My dad recently had where he lived, his girlfriend got suddenly implemented this tax. It was a massive hit of taxes that they got hit with. That they, of course, don't really have money. And Norway is one of the highest indebted countries in the world. They're number 3 right now, and they're just continuing to wrecking the system by having this massive increasing government. And what's interesting, so the Norwegian current government is 51.2% expenses to GDP. Well, if you take away the oil revenue, which is about 20% that they suck off of, that's why they can have this extended government.
Yeah.
It would be the size of the government compared to the whole is 71%, Josh. That's really insane. And of course now in Oslo, so I talked a little bit about before that Oslo, they have a lot of Green Party members that got elected in the last election in Norway. Well, of course, they're going full stupid by implementing Agenda 2030 laws by they call it low emission zones in Oslo, where they're going to charge vehicles under 12 tons. They're going to charge them either 300 kroner, so it's about 50 something dollars a day for driving in these zones. But on an annual basis, it would be $3,125 to actually drive in the zone. Now, for vehicles above 12 tons, which is also a lot of them, there's about 20,000 vehicles that are registered in Oslo and surrounding areas that needs to get through there. They're now looking at, of course, having to pay 6,300, so double of that. And what's going to happen, again, we talked about the minimum rate, the minimum income raise. We talked about all this. What's this going to cause? It's more inflation in Norway. We just had a recent inflation just jump into 4.5. It's calmed down a little bit. But people are very furious. My mom, for example, she's talking about always how high the rent is. Like she's renting an apartment that's probably about 800 foot.
Well, you had a carbon tax.
$2,200.
You had a carbon tax in Norway going back to 1992. You guys were the first in the world with Gro Harlem Brundtland, and of course Maurice Strong. That interestingly comes right from Winnipeg, Canada. And I feel bad for you, man, because you come from a socialist hellhole. I come from a socialist hellhole called Canada as well. Yeah. And
I came here and was relieved, so that should tell you something.
Well, yeah, well, that's the thing, because we've both seen the problems of socialism for ourselves, and just thank God we're not in Venezuela yet. That's the key point, yet. And also on top of that, John, you mentioned these low emission, like these insane regulations. We're looking at something quite similar in France as well right now. That's actually even more rampant in crazy socialist France. And it's just getting to the point where when are people going to realize what these actually do to the markets? When are people going to realize that those prices go up and the people in poverty hurt the most? And it's not about the wealthy. It's about those in poverty are hurting the most. It's about control. It's about debt servitude, because there's nothing a state loves more than a populace that's in servitude to the state through debt and through poverty, because they will get onto those programs. They will be subservient and get on their knees and beg for more grass in that little fenced-in area before they're marched off to the slaughter.
Well, the Green Party is communist, and of course Holly Swanson that we talked to, Trained for Treason, her book actually explains how the Green Party, put in their agenda for the school system to teach us about climate change and all this. And of course, if this Green Party, which is insane enough, They were running in the last Oslo election on banning traffic into Oslo. It's completely insane. You have around, I would say, 1.6 million people living around Oslo needs to get into the city. It's massive, like the trains and trams and everything. When I go there, you know, every year, and especially the last, like, it was 3 years ago when I was last in Oslo, the you know, the trams and everything is so congested now. So just wondering, how can you like make that happen with 1.6 million more people needing to get onto? Of course, a lot of them are using the system, but there's so many more that are getting forced to use this collective, you know, government subsidized transport system, and it's gonna completely destroy. We're looking at, like, my dad paying just to drive into Oslo. He goes through 3 toll booths in order to go into Oslo and pays about like $20 every day to just travel in.
No, that's insane. And compared to the average wage and everything, it's just so ridiculous. And, you know, they're not looking for convenience. They're not looking for how are they going to fit all these people in later on. They're thinking that there's going to be a lot less people, I do believe, considering the implementations that they've been putting forward since around 1973.
2030 is talking about it, the agenda that the Green Party, of course, is one of the major, you know, they're basically are the ones pushing it out to the public, and then you have other parties, you know, latching on because they're hardcore collectivists.
Well, John, what's the bottom line for your Norwegian friends and family back at home?
Well, the bottom line is I think people are starting to get really fed up. They're not really saying it because in Norway you're not supposed to stand up for yourself and everything because you'd be looked down at it for the collective, you know. I think what people need to start doing is look at the Libertarian Party in Norway. I've seen actually just over the last years they're starting to gain a little bit of traction, yeah. But the problem is it's so heavily socialized, so I don't know if they can actually gain any traction in Norway before it collapses. The problem is going to be you're going to get more and more and more and more and more and more and more taxes. You're going to be taxed to death until your grave, and then you're going to sit there with a whole bunch of debt, so there's nothing to give and give to any of your kids when you die. What's going to happen is complete debt servitude. But what you need to do is you need to start, you know, again, keeping your wealth insurance, like gold and silver. I know in Norway it's very hard because, of course, they tax 25% the sale on gold and silver.
They do it on the black market, hide it from the government. Yeah. I hate to say it, but, like, seriously, guys, don't be going and telling the government everything you're doing.
Norway is one of the biggest black markets in the world,
for good
by
reason.
The way. And when you look at all the socialist countries in the world, I looked at Curse of Cash they were talking, because that's the people they're coming after, the people that are not wanting to pay this massive amount of taxes. They want to strangle them even more. So of course, in Norway, I believe Norway was 4 or 5 or 6 or something on the amount of money outside of the system that are not taxing at all. And I've seen it so much in Norway myself, and it's just a reason why people are taxed to death. You got to understand that soon, or else you're going to just end up with a communist society, and then it's game over, guys.
Absolutely. The only person in the world that you truly have control over is yourself, and without that, what's the point? Individual liberty is a basis of humanity itself, and you can't have individual liberty without self-responsibility. You have to be an individual and not a big, giant, coercive, extorting collective in order to survive these massive calamities and not be just nothing more than a slave to be thrown into a cage if you disagree with something that the official narrative says.
Staten gir deg ikke frihet. Du er født med individuell frihet. That's it. That final message to my good Norwegian friends.
Thank you, John. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. We'll be back at you with much more. Check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored by YouTube. Also, check our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check me out at Josh Sigurdson, and check John out at The Economic Truth at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the social media where you get paid in cryptocurrencies to blog. It's taking over the dinosaur social medias like Facebook and Twitter, and I think that it truly is the future of social media. So check it out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.